Hi Judith, great to see you. You are the most prominent thinker and thought leader at BCG when it is about the role of the CEO. Now you've just published a new thought leadership piece on the next gen CEO. What is it about?
So the next gen CEO came from a thought experiment to say, does the CEO exist anymore in 2030? And of course I think they do. I think they have an even more difficult job than today. They're certainly, as we see today, going to spend a lot more time on the external world, customers, geopolitics, regulation that regulators are discovering as a means of national performance protection, tech. All of that takes the CEO's time, talent, and really being on top of the people agenda takes a lot more time. And the question is, where is it going to come from?
And then you were also talking about the CEO as the chief ecosystem orchestrator. What's that all about?
I believe that a lot of the capabilities that the company of the future will need sit outside your boundaries. They may sit with strategic partners, suppliers, contractors. Partly they even sit with competitors. And then you also see that a lot of the discussion on resilience drives a separation of different parts of your business. And if you do all of that, I think you don't manage a monolithic block. You actually manage an ecosystem where deeply engaging with the different constituents is a big part of your agenda.
And then you talk about a co-CEO model. I have to say that I was first skeptical when I read about it, because co-CEOs, shared leadership, shared accountabilities might lead to slower decision making. What's the reasoning behind this co-CEO model?
I think that there are a number of interesting trends. So if you see where co-CEO models are more common, usually people think they're like a bad option and they're like an emergency exit if the founder doesn't want to leave, but they know they don't have the capability for the next phase. When you analyze CEO contracts in a number of industries, you still see that there's a slow increase in the number of co-CEO models. And I think that's the interesting part. What's behind? Then there are many ways to solve that behind. It doesn't have to be a co-CEO. What you see is CEOs being very careful about the capabilities they bring and what the whole array of capabilities is that the company needs, and acknowledging that that might not sit in one person. The other one is that CEOs are a lot more cognizant of the fact that no one takes great decisions more than 8 to 10 hours a day. And people and leaders being a lot more careful about the amount of sleep they need, what they need in terms of exercise, and a much more structured agenda to invest their energy on the right topics. And I think that just reminds us that I think there's a lot more realism on what the CEO can contribute, and also in a way a return from this, what we partly saw in research in the 2010s, which was like, I can survive on 4 hours of sleep, exercise at 5 a.m. in the morning, and still be a fantastic CEO. That's for me a lot more behind the co-CEO model, and I think these are very healthy considerations.
Talking about performance, how does the next gen CEO drive competitiveness in his or her organization? And thinking around how to measure it, what do you think will be one of the most important KPIs going forward for a next gen CEO?
Look, I don't think that total shareholder return and stock market performance are metrics of the past. The organization needs to perform on the capital markets. I believe what we're going to see a lot more is scrutiny between the short-term performance a CEO drives and the consistency of long-term investments. That's one piece. And I think we're going to see a lot more metrics around talent, attracting the right talent, developing talent in a much better way than we do it today, and retaining your most important people. And I talk to many CEOs who believe that they're now the chief talent officer of the company and they need to invest a lot more time in that.
And now talking about AI and the role of AI for a next gen CEO. Can we or can you already now foresee what role AI, Gen AI will play in the decision making for a CEO, but also how important AI will be on his or her agenda?
I mean, there's a number of experiments, you've certainly followed some of them, where CEOs have created an AI version of themselves and see which types of decisions they take. I'm not too sure that's the first, application of AI in the corporation, but I think where the CEO will be instrumental is there's the simple stuff that's not as simple as that, by the way, which is deploy, right? What are a lot of the, not yet off the shelf, but hopefully soon off the shelf tools you deploy for productivity gains in your everyday processes around the company? That often sits in a mix of your HR department and your IT. But if as a CEO you don't drive this, adoption can be very, very slow, and we see that in many companies. Then you have the couple of areas you pick where you really redesign processes deeply because you feel it drives competitive performance. It's not just basically raising productivity across the playing field, but it's really distinct. And that's an area where we realize it usually needs the dialogue between the CEO and the business owners to identify these fields. And then thirdly, everywhere where you reinvent, because you say, look, there's a fundamentally different way we leverage our data to interact with our customers. Whatever it is, that's even less something you can just delegate to your IT department and hope for the best, but it does require that shaping power of the CEO. I think it also speaks to the fact, and we've seen that CEOs invest a lot of their time to upskill themselves. And the big question for me is how quickly does that translate into upskilling the organization?
So you're not just advising CEOs, you're also advising the next gen leaders. What are the key skills you advise them on to hone in?
I think in a much more volatile world, you like any leader to be schizophrenic in a good way. On the one hand, to accept that the company may have to turn left or right, work with different scenarios, because you don't know which future will transpire. On the other hand, you need to give clarity and confidence to the organization, not wrong confidence, but being very open about, the volatility in the business, but still believing you have a North Star. And then I think you'll spend a lot more time deeply engaging with people and reflecting on how you get them to the next level.
Thanks a lot, Judith, for these amazing insights. And is it fair to take away that these are, of course, the most challenging times to be a CEO, but it's also the most interesting time to guide, to lead, and to develop strategies for an organization?
I certainly agree with you on that. And you also see it when you look at data. A CEO never matters more for the performance of the organization than in volatile times. So I actually think it's a privilege to lead in these times.
Thanks a lot, Judith. As always, amazing to talk to you, and see you soon.